Madam President, my office recently received a message from a woman named Amanda. She lives in Illinois and in the Chicagoland area. She tells me that she and her wife, Callie, will be celebrating their 5th anniversary as a married couple. The two of them have actually been together for 8 years, but after the Supreme Court's 2015 decision in Obergefell, they decided it was time to tie the knot. That ruling affirmed their love and, just as important, their constitutional right. The court declared that the right to marry is a fundamental liberty under the Constitution for every American, regardless of sexual orientation. So in 2017, Amanda and her wife, Kelly, exercised that right, and today they're the proud parents of 2 beautiful young children, a daughter, Austin, and a son, Ren. Really, that should be the end of the story. With Obergefell, Amanda and her wife were guaranteed the same rights as me and my wife, and it should be the beginning of a new story. A loving couple who can now focus on their family and taking care of the day-to-day responsibilities, paying the bills, feeding the kids, navigating life as working parents. But sadly, Amanda and many others are now living in fear. Like millions of Americans, she's facing the very real prospect that this Supreme Court could soon rule that her right to marry the person she loves is not protected by the Constitution. She saw what this radical far-right Supreme Court did with the Dobbs decision just a few months ago, the decision that erased the constitutional right for the women of America to make their own reproductive health choices. And now she and Callie are wondering, will they come for our rights to marry next? Amanda wrote to my office, quote, Justice Clarence Thomas, in his concurring opinion in Dobbs, wrote that the court should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. She said, quote, for the first time in our history, Americans are facing the continued loss of civil rights by this Supreme Court. Our 2 young children are growing up in a world where they may, in some cases, have less rights, fewer rights, than their parents and grandparents. Amanda tells me she and her wife are taking every legal step they can do to ensure that our recognition as parents to our children cannot be challenged. This is emotionally and financially taxing, she said, and yet we feel we have to do it. There are more than 700,000 married same-sex couples in America. Couples like Amanda and Callie, whose love and legal status were recognized under the law and protected by a Supreme Court decision in Obergefell. Couples who, along with their friends and families, are demanding the Senate do what we should have done years ago, codify marriage equality. We can put their minds at ease before Justice Thomas and the far-right majority even have a chance to rip away yet another fundamental freedom. And this is not an abstract exercise. Early next month, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in a case called 303 Creative LLC versus Ellenus. It's a case that apparently is concerned with free speech, involving a website designer in Colorado who wants to build wedding websites, but with a disclaimer that proudly announces she will not build websites for same-sex couples. She sued the state of Colorado, demanding the right to boast about her plans to discriminate against LGBTQ Americans. Such a disclaimer would violate a state civil rights law, which prohibits businesses from discriminating or intending to discriminate against someone on the basis of their sexual orientation. If the Supreme Court's last term and the Dobbs decision are any indication, this radical, far-right majority on the court could very well use this case to start the erosion of protections of LGBTQ Americans. It's exactly the kind of judicial activism we've come to expect from this court's conservative majority. Remember when they boasted about the fact that Donald Trump was going to put on 3 justices who would rule his way in future cases? It was pretty clear from that day forward that the Supreme Court had a political bent. The Federalist Society had to give its stamp of approval Now, the Federalist Society is a multi-million-dollar political arm of the Republican Party, and before any judicial nominee had a chance in my Senate Judiciary Committee in the Republican days, they had to get the approval of the Federalist Society. The Federalist Society from the start was setting out to eliminate a woman's right to choose. They had their victory in the Dobbs decision, but the American people spoke on November 8th, and overwhelmingly they said across America, you can't get away with eliminating rights already established under the Constitution for any Americans. I hope that that sentiment grows, and eventually we reverse the Dobbs decision. What we've seen is exactly the kind of judicial activism we can come to expect from the court's conservative majority. They twist the law and set aside longstanding precedent to establish the policies they prefer. But it's not the Supreme Court's role to make the laws. How many times have we heard that speech from Republicans? We don't want judicial activists, they say. That job of making the laws belongs in Congress. And today we can defend families like Amanda's by voting for the Respect for Marriage Act, which passed just a few moments ago here on the floor of the Senate with a strong bipartisan vote. It will protect marriage equality under the federal law, not just for LGBTQ couples, but also interracial couples, whose rights could also be in peril by the court's far-right majority. The issue of marriage equality is too important to get bogged down in partisanship, which is why this bill is a bipartisan compromise. I hope that getting 60 votes for the Respect for Marriage Act is going to be an indication of more cooperation to guarantee that Amanda and Callie do not have to lose sleep over the future that they have as loving individuals married to one another and parents. In last week's election, the American people sent a clear message to Washington and to the Senate. Get it together. Work together. No more toxic culture wars. No more divisive rhetoric. No more big lie. Enough. If you want to stand for family values, let's start by enacting protections for every family in America. We can do it certainly with the Respect for Marriage Act and even more. To Amanda and Callie, I'd like to say happy 5th anniversary. I hope by the time your 6th anniversary comes around, you won't even have to think twice about whether your rights are secure.